Wyatt Stone woke before dawn, as he always did. Not by choice, the war had carved that habit into him, like the bullet had carved a path through his thigh. 10 years since Gettysburg, and still his body refused sleep once the eastern sky began to pale. Some lessons, once learned in blood, never wash away. The Winchester Model 1866 rested against the bedpost, within arm's reach. Wyatt grabbed it in a single fluid motion when a low growl cut through the darkness outside. His boots hit the rough wooden floor without a sound as he moved to the window. Yellow eyes reflected in the moonlight. A gray wolf, lean and hungry, stalking the edge of his cattle pen. The rifle came up smooth, an extension of his arm. Wyatt drew breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked sharp against the Arizona night. The wolf dropped without a sound. "One less problem," Wyatt muttered, lowering the rifle. The year was 1875, and Wyatt Stone's 40 acres in the Arizona Territory represented everything he had left in the world. A small herd of cattle, 2 milk goats, and the old war horse that had carried him west after he buried Anna and their unborn son. 5 years gone, taken by the fever that swept through Tennessee like God's own wrath. Wyatt's face remained hard as granite as he lit the lantern and checked his leg. The old wound always ached worst at dawn. Shrapnel still buried deep where no surgeon could reach. A souvenir from fighting for a cause that had long since lost its meaning to him. He poured coffee into a tin cup and stepped onto the porch, scanning the horizon. The sun hadn't yet crested the Catalina Mountains, but the sky had begun its slow burn from black to purple. His land stretched before him harsh, unforgiving, but his. Every rock and cactus purchased with sweat and blood. That's when he noticed it. A small bundle on the porch steps. Too small for a threat, too deliberate for trash blown in by the wind. The rifle came up again, instinct driving the motion. Wyatt circled the bundle, eyes scanning the tree line, the rocks, anywhere a shooter might hide. Nothing moved in the early dawn light. He nudged the bundle with his boot. It shifted, and a soft whimper rose from within. "Christ Almighty," he breathed, setting the rifle down. He knelt and pulled back the deerskin wrapping. A baby girl stared up at him with wide, dark eyes. Apache, no more than 6 months old. Her tiny fists clenched and unclenched against the elaborately beaded leather that covered her. She wasn't crying, just watching him with a quiet intensity that unsettled him more than tears would have. "Who the hell left you here?" Wyatt muttered, scanning the horizon again. The decision came quickly. Taking the child to town meant the orphanage, or worse. He'd seen how the settlers treated Indian problems. This child wouldn't stand a chance. Wyatt lifted her carefully, surprised by her weight. Substantial enough to have been fed well until recently, but her skin felt cool, her breathing shallow. She needed food and warmth, fast. Inside, he worked methodically. The military had taught him one thing useful for civilian life: how to think clearly in chaos. He warmed goat's milk on the stove, testing it against his wrist, like he'd once seen Anna do with their neighbor's baby. He added honey, then fed the child using a clean cloth dipped in the mixture. She took it hungrily, eyes never leaving his face. "You've got fighting spirit," he said, nodding with approval. "Going to need that out here." By mid-morning, Wyatt had fashioned a makeshift cradle from an old ammunition crate lined with sheep's wool. The baby slept there now, swaddled tight, her breathing steadier. He placed her near the stove for warmth, but kept his Bowie knife and Colt revolver within reach on the table. Whoever had left her might come back, and they might not come friendly. On the third day, he found the tracks. He was checking the south fence line when he spotted them boot prints, not moccasins, following the edge of his property. Store-bought boots with a distinctive heel pattern, fresh, made within the last day. And near the corner post, a cigarette stub, not American tobacco, but the stronger Mexican variety. "Someone's watching," Wyatt muttered, crouching to examine the dirt more closely. That night, he set up an alarm system, tin cans strung on wire around the perimeter of the cabin. He reinforced the shutters and moved his bed to give him a clear line of sight to both the door and the window. The baby he'd started thinking of her as Hope, though he hadn't said it aloud, slept in her crate beside him. On the fifth night, the storm hit. Rain hammered the roof as wind howled through the canyon, rattling the shutters. Above the cacophony, Wyatt heard his alarm trigger the faint jingle of cans by the east fence. The Winchester came to his shoulder before he'd fully registered the sound. He moved to the window, positioning himself to the side, out of sight but able to see the yard. A figure struggled through the rain, small and unsteady. Not a man, a woman, by the look of it, barely staying upright as she stumbled toward the cabin. Wyatt moved to the door, rifle ready. Waited for her to reach the steps, then pulled the door open suddenly, weapon raised. She didn't flinch, just stood there, rain plastering her long black hair to her face, fever-bright eyes locked on the cradle visible behind him. An Apache woman, young but hard-worn, with fresh burns on her wrists and a half-healed slash across her shoulder. Her hand clutched a small knife, but it hung limply at her side. "The child is yours," Wyatt said. Not a question. She nodded once, swaying slightly. He could see she was fighting to stay conscious. Wyatt lowered the rifle, not fully, but enough. "Come in before you collapse." She stepped past him, eyes never leaving the cradle. When she reached it, her legs finally gave out. She knelt, pressing her forehead against the rough wood, one hand reaching out to touch the baby's chest as if to feel her heartbeat. Wyatt stood watching, rifle still in hand, as she whispered something in Apache to the child. The baby stirred, made a soft cooing sound, then settled again. Only then did the woman's shoulders relax, though her body still trembled with fever. "You're sick," Wyatt said finally. "Sit by the fire." She obeyed because she had no strength left to refuse. Wyatt handed her a tin cup of willow bark tea, the only medicine he had, and watched as she drank it slowly, eyes still fixed on the baby. "What's your name?" he asked. "Kiona," she said, voice rough from disuse. "The child's been eating, not enough, but she's strong." Something like gratitude flickered in Kiona's eyes. She reached for the baby again, and Wyatt didn't stop her as she lifted the child to her chest. The knock at the door came just after dawn. 3 sharp raps, confident, demanding. Wyatt had slept in the chair, rifle across his lap, while Kiona and the baby shared the cot. At the sound, he was instantly alert, finger on the trigger as he moved to the window. A grizzled older man stood on the porch, gray beard wild in the morning light. A Sharps buffalo rifle held casually in the crook of his arm. Jeb Morgan, his nearest neighbor, 3 miles down the valley. Wyatt opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Mornin'," Jeb said, eyes taking in Wyatt's disheveled appearance. "Saw smoke all night. Figured I'd check, weren't dead. Appreciate the concern." Jeb's eyes flicked past him, catching sight of Kiona sitting by the stove. His bushy eyebrows rose, but his expression remained carefully neutral. "Suppose you got a story there," he said. "Suppose I do." Jeb nodded toward the yard. "Got a minute?" Outside, Jeb leaned against the porch rail, rolling a cigarette with practiced fingers. "That's Apache woman you got in there." "She is." "Baby hers?" "Yes." Jeb lit the cigarette, inhaled deeply. "You know there's a gang working these parts. Mexican fellow name of Vasquez. Trades in people, mostly Apache women. Sells them to mining camps, ranches down south." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "You think she's running from him?" "5 men riding with him last I heard. Mean bastards." Jeb took another drag. "You ain't exactly made friends in town. Keeping to yourself. They won't help if trouble comes." "Wasn't planning to ask." Jeb studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Reckon you could use another gun. Trouble does come." Wyatt hadn't expected that. "Why would you help?" The older man shrugged. "Fought Apaches 20 years. Killed more than my share. But there's fighting, and there's what Vasquez does. Man's got to draw a line somewhere." Wyatt extended his hand. "Appreciate it." Jeb took it, his grip firm. "I'll bring extra ammunition tomorrow, and some real food. Bet you're feeding that woman nothing but beans and jerky." "It's what I eat." And that's why you're the sorriest-looking son of a bitch in the territory, Jeb said with a bark of laughter. My Martha'd roll in her grave if I didn't bring proper food for a nursing mother. Inside, Kiona sat straighter when Wyatt returned. Her eyes followed him warily. That man, she said, he kills Apache. He did, Wyatt acknowledged. Now he's going to help us. Why? Same reason I kept your child safe. Some things a man just does. 2 days later, Kiona's fever broke. She moved around the cabin with growing strength, caring for Hope. Wyatt had finally used the name aloud and helping with chores without being asked. She said little, but her dark eyes missed nothing. That evening, after Hope had fallen asleep, Kiona sat across from Wyatt at the table. You want to know why I left her, she said suddenly. Wyatt looked up from cleaning his revolver. If you want to tell me. She stared at her hands. Man named Vasquez. Says he bought me from missionary family, keeps women in camp near Mexico border. When I got with child, he beat me. Said it wasn't his. Her voice remained flat, emotionless, but her fingers curled into fists. I ran when he was drunk, had Hope in mountains, but he tracked us. Said he would kill her if I didn't come back, I thought. Her voice faltered for the first time. I thought she'd have better chance without me. Wyatt set the gun down. How many men ride with him? 5. All killers. And they're coming. Kiona nodded. He marks what he thinks is his. Wyatt's face hardened. Then we'll be ready. The next morning, Jeb arrived with supplies, ammunition, food, and an old Sharps carbine he insisted Kiona should learn to use. Woman needs her own protection, he said firmly. Can't always depend on a man being around. Out behind the barn, they set up targets, tin cans, and bottles on fence posts. Wyatt showed Kiona how to load the small Colt pocket pistol, explaining each step methodically. Powder, ball, ram it down. 5 shots before you reload. Keep your wrists firm. Her first shot missed by yards. The second clipped the edge of a can. By the third, her hands had stopped shaking. You're a quick study, Wyatt noted. I watched men shoot before. Never held gun myself. Jeb nodded approvingly. Woman in these parts needs to shoot straight. Indians, outlaws, rattlesnakes all respect a loaded gun. Kiona's eyes flashed. My people respect more than guns. Didn't mean no offense, Jeb said, raising his hands. Just speaking plain. Wyatt intervened. We need to prepare the house. Vasquez won't come alone. Over the next days, they worked together, transforming the small ranch into a fortress. They boarded up the lower windows, created firing positions, and stockpiled water and ammunition. Jeb brought news from town. Vasquez had been spotted with 3 new men, asking questions about a lone rancher with Apache troubles. Wyatt rode into town for additional supplies. At the general store, he felt the stares before he heard the whispers. That's him, the one harboring that Apache squaw. He ignored them, purchasing powder, lead, and medical supplies with silent efficiency. As he loaded his saddlebags outside, 3 men approached ranch hands from the big spread north of town. Here you got yourself an Indian whore, Stone, the largest one called out. Sharing her with old Jeb, too? Wyatt turned slowly. Walk away! The man stepped closer. What's wrong with American women? Not good enough for a war hero? Wyatt's fist connected before the man could react, driving hard into his solar plexus. As he doubled over, Wyatt brought his knee up into the man's face, feeling cartilage crack. The other 2 rushed him. Wyatt sidestepped one, grabbed the other by his shirt front, and slammed him against the hitching post. The fight ended in seconds. 3 men groaning on the ground, and Wyatt calmly mounting his horse, knuckles bloodied but face expressionless. You tell Vasquez, he said to them, that I'll be waiting. He rode out of town with his back straight, feeling eyes on him until he crested the ridge. Only then did he check his saddlebags, finding what he expected someone had searched them while he was inside. They were looking for information, testing his resolve. That night, he spotted the first scout, a lone rider, watching the ranch from the southern ridge. Wyatt let him watch. Let him see the preparations, the armed men, the confidence. Let him report back what he found. Kiona came to stand beside him on the porch. Vasquez won't stop. I know. Why do you fight for us? We are nothing to you. Wyatt was silent for a long moment. I fought 4 years for a flag, lost friends, took a bullet, watched men die screaming, all for an idea. He looked at her. This is real. This land, that child, something worth fighting for. The attack came at dawn 3 days later. Wyatt was already awake, as always, when he heard the distant thunder of hooves. He roused Jeb, who slept on a bedroll near the door, and moved to the window. 6 riders, he reported, voice calm, coming fast from the east. Kiona appeared beside him, hope clutched to her chest. Vasquez? Can't tell yet. Get in the root cellar. She hesitated. I can fight. Not with the baby. Go. We'll handle this. As the riders approached, Wyatt and Jeb took their positions. Jeb at the north window with his sharps, Wyatt on the porch with the Winchester. The riders stopped just beyond effective rifle range. One man moved forward, tall in the saddle, a silver-plated revolver visible on his hip. That's him, Jeb muttered. Diego Vasquez. Vasquez raised his hand in greeting, as if visiting a friend. Senor Stone, he called. I believe you have something of mine. Wyatt stepped off the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Nothing here belongs to you, Vasquez. The Apache woman. She is my property. I have papers. Papers don't mean much out here. Vasquez smiled, teeth white against his sun-darkened skin. I am a reasonable man. I will pay you for your trouble. $200. Very generous. Not interested. The smile vanished. Then perhaps we take her and burn your little ranch as payment for wasting my time. You're welcome to try. Vasquez's hand dropped to his gun, but before he could draw, the crack of Jeb's rifle split the morning air. The rider to Vasquez's left pitched backward off his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Hell erupted. Vasquez and his men scattered, firing wildly as they sought cover. Wyatt dropped to one knee, the Winchester steady in his hands. He tracked one rider racing toward the barn, led him by inches, and squeezed the trigger. The man tumbled from the saddle. Bullets splintered wood around him as Wyatt ducked back behind the porch post. Jeb fired again, the heavy sharps booming across the yard. Got another, the old man called. 3 down. Vasquez and his remaining men had reached the cover of the rocks 50 yards out. The gunfire intensified, bullets thudding into the cabin walls. Wyatt moved from window to window, firing carefully, making each shot count. His world narrowed to simple calculations: distance, wind, lead time, the mechanical precision of killing he'd learned in the war. A cry from inside. Jeb stumbled back from his position, blood spreading across his shirt. I'm hit, he gasped. Bastard got lucky. Wyatt dragged him to cover. The wound was high in the shoulder, bleeding freely, but not immediately fatal. Press here, he ordered, guiding Jeb's good hand to the wound. Keep pressure. Wood. A sudden crash from the back of the cabin. Wyatt spun, rifle coming up, as the door to the root cellar splintered. Kiona backed away, Colt pistol in one hand, Hope clutched to her chest with the other. One of Vasquez's men lunged through the broken door. Kiona fired once, twice, 3 times the small pistol bucking in her hand. The man staggered, blood blooming across his chest, then collapsed. Wyatt moved to the window. 2 left Vasquez and 1 gunman. They were preparing to rush the cabin from different directions. Kiona, he called, get Jeb and Hope to the back room. Barricade the door. As she dragged the wounded man away, Wyatt checked his ammunition. 4 rounds in the Winchester, 2 in his Colt. Not enough. The last gunman made his move, sprinting toward the front door. Wyatt waited until he was halfway across the yard, then stepped onto the porch and fired. The man dropped. 1 left. Vasquez. Silence settled over the ranch. Wyatt reloaded his revolver, eyes scanning the rocks where Vasquez had taken cover. Nothing moved. Come on out, Vasquez, he called. Your men are dead. No response. Wyatt stepped back inside, moving cautiously toward the rear of the cabin. "Kiona, Jeb?" "Here," came her voice from behind the bedroom door. "Jeb is bleeding bad." "Stay put, it's not over." Glass shattered as Vasquez burst through the side window, landing in a crouch, revolver already firing. The first bullet tore through Wyatt's sleeve. The second missed entirely. Wyatt fired back, but Vasquez had already rolled behind the table. "You fight well for a gringo," Vasquez called. "But that woman belongs to me. I paid good money." "No person belongs to another," Wyatt answered, moving sideways, trying to get an angle. Vasquez laughed. "Such noble ideas. What will you do with her when I'm gone? Make her your wife? Have pale babies? The town already talks, you know. Don't much care what they say." "Then you are a fool." Wyatt lunged around the corner, firing twice. Vasquez ducked, returning fire, the silver revolver flashing in the dim light. A bullet grazed Wyatt's temple, hot pain followed by warm blood flowing into his eye. Half blinded, he charged forward, crashing into Vasquez. Both men went down hard, guns skittering across the floor. Vasquez was younger, faster, landing a punishing blow to Wyatt's wounded leg. Pain exploded through the old injury as they grappled. Vasquez pulled a knife, the blade glinting as it arced toward Wyatt's throat. Wyatt caught his wrist, straining against the man's strength. Slowly, inexorably, the knife edged closer. A shot rang out. Vasquez jerked, eyes widening in surprise. Blood spread across his chest as he looked down. Behind him stood Kiona, Wyatt's Colt smoking in her hand. She'd fired through the gap in the bedroom door. "You don't own me," she said softly. Vasquez toppled sideways, the knife falling from nerveless fingers. Wyatt grabbed it and drove it into the man's heart with one decisive thrust, ending the matter permanently. Silence descended on the cabin once more, broken only by their ragged breathing and Jeb's low groans from the bedroom. "It's over," Wyatt said, wiping blood from his eyes. Kiona lowered the gun, for now. The days that followed passed in a blur of activity, bodies buried far from the house, wounds cleaned and bandaged, the cabin repaired. Jeb survived his injury, but would never have full use of his right arm again. "Small price to pay," the old man said gruffly when he was well enough to sit on the porch. "Been shot at by better men than that Mexican trash." Wyatt rode into town to report the incident to the local sheriff, a formality more than anything. Self-defense against known outlaws required little explanation in the territory. No one asked detailed questions about the Apache woman and child. When he returned, he found Kiona teaching Hope to crawl in the yard. The child's determined face serious as she pushed herself forward on tiny arms. "She has your stubbornness," Kiona observed as Wyatt dismounted. "She has your aim," he replied, the closest he'd come to a joke in years. That evening, Jeb announced his decision to build a small cabin on the north edge of Wyatt's property. "Too damn old to live alone," he declared. "Besides, someone's got to teach that little one to fish when she's bigger." Wyatt didn't argue. The old scout had earned his place. As summer turned to fall, the ranch began to prosper. Wyatt expanded the cattle herd, adding 15 head purchased with the money he'd saved for years. Kiona proved skilled with the garden, coaxing vegetables from the reluctant soil. Hope grew stronger daily, her laughter the only sound that could soften the hard lines around Wyatt's eyes. One crisp October evening, Wyatt sat on the porch steps, carving a small wooden horse for Hope. Kiona joined him, her shoulder brushing against his as she sat. Neither moved away. "Winter comes soon," she said. "It does." She hesitated. "When snow falls, people in town will talk more about why I stay." Wyatt set down his knife and the half-finished carving. From his pocket, he withdrew something small, a silver pin shaped like a horseshoe, hammered from an old coin. "Made this," he said simply, holding it out to her. "Among my people, it means protection, good fortune." Kiona took it, fingers brushing his. "Among mine, a man gives such gifts only to family." "I know." She held his gaze for a long moment, then reached up and secured the pin in her hair. No words passed between them, none were needed. The gesture was commitment enough for people who valued actions over promises. 1 year later, Wyatt Stone stood on the same porch, watching the sun rise over a ranch twice the size it had been. 25 cattle grazed in the expanded pasture. A new barn stood where the old one had burned. Jeb's cabin, visible on the northern ridge, sent up a thin line of smoke as the old man started his morning fire. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Hope toddled out on unsteady legs, making a beeline for his boots. "Pa!" she called, arms reaching upward. Wyatt lifted her, settling her against his chest with practiced ease. At 18 months, she was strong and healthy, her dark eyes bright with intelligence. She wore a small dress Kiona had made, decorated with traditional Apache beadwork. Kiona followed, one hand resting on her swollen belly, where their second child grew. She wore the silver horseshoe pin in her hair, now complemented by a simple band on her finger they had married in a brief ceremony performed by a traveling preacher 3 months earlier. "You should be resting," Wyatt said, his gruff tone belied by the concern in his eyes. "I rest enough," she replied, standing beside him to survey their land. "The baby is strong, like his father." Wyatt didn't correct her assumption it would be a boy. Apache women had ways of knowing such things. Hope squirmed in his arms, pointing at a hawk circling overhead. "Bird, big bird." "That's right," Wyatt said, his voice gentler than anyone from his military days would have recognized. "That's a red-tailed hawk. He's hunting." "Like Pa," Hope declared confidently. Kiona smiled. "Yes, like your father." As the sun cleared the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they had fought for, Wyatt Stone felt something he had never expected to feel again after the war, after Anna purpose. Not just survival, but a legacy worth building, a family worth protecting. The Winchester still stood by the door. The Colt still hung at his hip. The threats hadn't ended with Vasquez. The frontier ensured new dangers with each season. But now, Wyatt Stone had something he'd lost in the blood-soaked fields of Gettysburg, a reason to wake before dawn each day that went beyond mere habit. He had found his ground and would stand it until his last breath.